I am in the studio and I am with the candidate who is running for county judge here in Grayson County, Texas, Mr. Bruce Dawsey. Please introduce yourself, Bruce.
Hi, Shell. Well, thanks for having me tonight. My name is Bruce Dawsey. I am running for county judge. I have an opponent in this race that most people are familiar with, and I'm hoping that people listening will get to know me, know my viewpoints, and hopefully I can win some votes tonight.
So tell me just a little bit about yourself. One of the things I want you to do is kind of tell us your years of experience on the police force. I know people kind of already know that. So kind of give me your little bio really quick for everybody who does not know you.
Okay. Well, I'm originally from Louisiana.
What?
Yes, I grew up in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and then in high school, my family moved to New Orleans, and so I spent several years there before I go in the military. I was a military policeman in the Army. I served during Desert Storm. After Desert Storm, they were doing a reduction in forces, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, Houston PD is applying, or they're having testing," and he was looking at getting out. I had just re-enlisted, an internal affairs investigator, and I did that for several years. Then we had a change in leadership, and one of my former detectives that had made his way to human resource manager for the city of Sherman came back as police chief. He used to work for me, and I'd always told my wife that, one day, he's smart enough, one day I would have no problem working for him. He came back and then asked me to promote to assistant chief, and I've been doing that for the last four or 5 years now. I can't remember, time's flown by. But I'm currently the assistant chief over the patrol division with the Sherman Police Department. So I have those responsibilities. I have 40 patrolmen, 2 lieutenants, 4 sergeants, 4 corporals.
Wow.
And then I'm over the K-9 Bureau, our motor program, our SWAT team, and the critical accident investigation team. So I've got my hands full, but
yes, you do.
I've got a really good team of people that work with me, and together we do a good job.
That's one of my questions I wanted to ask you is, what is your position on the Dorchester cement plant?
That's near and dear to my heart because, we lived in the Howe area for 17, 18 years. My daughter graduated from Howe. My son went through Howe up until high school, and then he switched over to Sherman. But, I have tons of friends that are either just regular everyday people, but a lot of farmers that I know and went to church with. And the location that they're wanting to put this it's not a densely populated area, but it's a populated area of people that have lived in that area for generations. And having been on the school board in Howe, I know a lot of that farmland will eventually, it's planned for those to be subdivisions. So I don't know why or how a cement plant would ever show up in that area, or how it came on the radar, because in my opinion, it's going to stifle growth, because these master plan communities that have been in the works for years, they're not going to want to come there, because who's going to want to buy, thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in homes next to a cement plant. So, I'm hoping that the fight is taking place to prevent that. And if elected, and I get into that office, if it hasn't been decided yet, I will definitely pick up the mantle and fight it as much as we can as a community.
So another thing that I have here is our county roads, which are not great, and we are expecting this growth. We've got TI coming in and all that, and so all this growth is going to happen. Are there tax dollars to fix the roads, and if so, why haven't it been done?
I believe that there are tax dollars to do that. Even though my opponent has lowered county taxes over the last couple of years, the percentage of growth has surpassed what our normal allotment would be for tax dollars, if that makes sense. So there is money there to fix the roads. Now, what's being done with it, I don't know. Each of the 4 commissioners have responsibility over their roads budgets.
Sure.
And maintenance. And I know there's there's never enough money to go around all the time to fix everything all the time. I'm well aware of that, having worked so long in municipal government. But there's no excuse for some of the conditions of the roads around our county, you know, and with the growth that's coming, hopefully with that continued growth, we can continue to allow the growth to pay for the improvements that are gonna be needed. Because the growth is gonna happen no matter what. It doesn't matter who your county commissioner is, who your county judge is, that growth is coming.
Right.
And with the expansion of TI, that's gonna spark even more growth on its own. So as the highway becomes an interstate, all of that is gonna transition, and our community is not gonna look the same in the next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely not, you are so right.
So yes, I believe that there is money now. Is there money to fix every road all over Grayson County? No, but there are main thoroughfares that need to be addressed. And definitely areas of our community where, you know, you drive down, you have $1 million homes, and they have some of the worst roads in the county, and I don't understand how that happened.
Hoarding the access tax dollars. What did you mean by that?
Well, currently the practice, you know, when they come up with the budget, each county commissioner gets their own bucket of money. And so it's factored in to how much tax revenue came in, and then it's divided up among all the county services, but then each of the 4 commissioners get a bucket of money. Well, in normal government spending, if you don't use your bucket of money, then you have to return that, and it goes back into a general fund. But the county commissioners are currently allowed to keep that money. So if they don't spend that much, then they can build and continue to build their funds, which doesn't make sense to me. I could see maybe a short-term build if you have plans and you have already got that money allocated to something.
Sure.
But to just be able to save it for just unknown or unpublished reasons doesn't make any sense to me. So that's something I really want to look into once I get into office. And, you know, if we have that much excess money, then why are our taxes even lower than what they currently are? So that's something I want to look at, because we could do something else with those monies. You know, currently we, as a county agency, the county government doesn't spend hardly anything when it comes to mental health.
I was gonna ask you that too. You brought that up at your campaign kickoff. Elaborate on that just a little bit about the mental health, because you did bring that up during the campaign kickoff.
Well, TCC is our county mental health agency, and they rely on grants and fundings through local agencies, the cities, the county government, and everything else. Currently, our county doesn't adequately fund that program, and through the years, the state has cut funding to MHMR and TCC and all those programs for mental health. But our county is not providing adequate funding, and I've heard it from everything from the Child and Family Guidance Center to TCC and everything else, that my opponent doesn't care about those issues. He only cares about the tax rate and real estate. So to me, we need a county judge who is going to focus on all areas, being mental health being one, transparency in spending is another. Allowing growth to pay for growth. And if we're hoarding money here, why aren't we providing better services to other areas? You know, the county ambulance services, you know, the county doesn't operate or have its own ambulance service. And so all of the small communities rely on volunteers, or they rely on mutual aid agreements with the major cities and each other. Denison ran into a problem where they were spending so much money on their ambulance service going out into the county, and the county would not look at renegotiating the funding amounts. So they had to do away with their ambulance service. Now there's talk of them bringing that back, but that hole there just created more issues where Sherman now has to send people out to that part of the county, Preston has to send people, Bells has to try and send people, and it diminishes the quality of life if you have to wait 30 minutes for an ambulance to get there. So that's another thing that I want to look at, as well as not just roads and mental health, but just overall life sustaining areas that or services that aren't being provided for. It's not about just making people rich. You know, It's not about.
Y'all heard that.
It's not about growing business where you own property. It should be based on the growth needs to come where it benefits everyone in the county.
Correct.
Everywhere from Tioga to Collinsville to Bells to Pottsboro, all those areas, Dorchester's, all those areas are part of Grayson County, and they pay their fair share of taxes. Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't be, the county judge should not be worried about what real estate holdings he has or what his partners have. I'm not in this to get rich. I'm in this to right what I feel are some wrongs that have happened, and move on from there. Make the appropriate changes, set it up so that someone else can come in behind me and hopefully follow those same values. But you're not going to see me on Forbes magazine having made millions of dollars for being county judge.
You can be county judge of the year. Let's do that. You know what I mean?
I'll be happy.
Okay, so now you had a coffee meet and greet on the 15th on Martin Luther King Day.
Yes, ma'am.
We did. So the question is racism still an issue in our county?
I think racism is still an issue in our nation. You know, a lot of it isn't as bad as it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. I don't think it's that bad, but I think there is a lot of underlying biases that people maybe not even realize that they have. And so I think it is an issue. I think we need to continue and address it, and celebrating the Martin Luther King marches, and the progress that's been made in the past, and not forget about it so that we don't relive our past. We don't want to go backwards, you know. The last year and a half for me being a law enforcement officer was extremely difficult because of all the rioting that was taking place and the stupid things that some police agencies would do. Looking at it from a Texas perspective, a lot of the practices that were done in the Northeast and the Northwest, we haven't done those. Chokeholds have not been a thing here in Texas law enforcement for 20 years. I've never seen where you're supposed to put your knee on anyone's neck, and never been trained that way. So when I see that these few individual officers do really stupid stuff, it's irritating. And then to see the community knowing my heart and my family's heart, and the men and women that work for me, I know them. And to see that in that blanket of hate for the law enforcement gets spread over everyone because of a few people, it was really difficult. I had friends of mine that I went through the academy with almost 30 years ago that they hung it up, and they were good police officers that had the community at heart, that just couldn't do it anymore, and they actually retired, and I actually considered it, but I wanted to be able to stick it out to try and provide some mentorship and leadership, because I've got a young department. We've had a lot of guys retire over the years just through natural attrition, and I felt if I left, I would be shorting them. Not that I can right all the wrongs.
Right.
That's where I feel. But to answer your question, yes, I believe that racism does still exist. Not on the scale as it did,
sure,
you know, when I was a youth in South Louisiana.
Sure.
I saw a lot of that over the years, even though it was illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's taken time. But I think it's personal biases that people.
We really know that they're not a threat to us. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's just a trend in policing that we got away from. You know, when I grew up in policing, it was neighborhood oriented policing,
mm-hmm.
COP, community oriented policing.
Mm-hmm.
The old timers used to refer to it, instead of NOP, they called it, instead of neighborhood oriented policing, they called it nobody on patrol, because everybody was at community events. But I grew up with that policing concept, and it was something that I knew and I appreciated, because I'm kind of a community person. If you can't tell by some of my service, I like being able to get to know people on a personal level as much as you can. But law enforcement kind of got away from that. We went into what was called intelligence-led policing, and it's where you know 10% of the people do 90% of the crime. So
Gotcha.
focus on those areas and targeting zero tolerance areas,
Okay.
ticket writing, really boning down on that. But 10% of the people do 90% of the crime. But if you're focusing on a neighborhood that is a low income minority area, not 10% of that population is part of the problem, but they're all getting stopped by the police because the police are hunting. They're looking for those 10% that are blended into that community. Ferguson, Missouri is a prime example in my opinion. It was a small town. They were focused on heavy law enforcement. It wasn't do it because you need to. It was do it because you can. We're going to go in there. We're going to tear these things up. We're going to write as many tickets as we can. And we're not going to give anybody any breaks for anything. And then they had an officer who was involved in a shooting that on the surface looked really bad and in the end turned out to be justified. But the community didn't care because they had been persecuted and beat down so much by that local agency. And that started a shift again in policing mentality, but it just continued on from there, and it just snowballed.
Yeah.
Fortunately, in Sherman, we've always had a good relationship with all of our community, and that's a really important thing. When we had riots going on everywhere else, we didn't have that here. We had protests, which is perfect.
We had peaceful protests.
But we had peaceful protests. Now, we had a few people that came in from the outside that wanted to agitate and fire things up just to make it look more dramatic.
Exactly.
But as a community, as a whole, we've had a good relationship. And it's not perfect.
Sure.
There's always work that can be done. But I think you're seeing now a shift in law enforcement where it's going back to that neighborhood-oriented policing, where you have beat integrity, where the officers work the same area and they get to know the people. I've seen it on Facebook and other things where my guys are out playing basketball. They're driving around, and that's what we need more of.
Yes.
It's not, the war on drugs. We're never going to win that war. It's just it's turned itself into its own money-making industry. Now, not saying I agree with drugs, but I think we need to look at our enforcement of the way in which it's done. And police should be servants and protectors, not crime fighters. I mean, now we have a job to do.
Sure.
And we have to make arrests to punish the people who are doing the things that are wrong.
Right.
But it goes back to do things that because you need to, not because you can. So that's my, sorry, I got a little off track.
No, that's perfectly said.